Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode that we're recording here for the Nillion podcast. For today's guest, we have Vishak from MonadicDNA. Really excited to have this conversation because the whole point of the series that we're doing is to showcase and put a spotlight on founding entrepreneurs building on Nillion and showcasing why they've made that decision and what they're bringing to market. So great to have you with us today, Vishak.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to be here. I'm really pleased to be in the first episode, and I'm just really excited to talk about everything we're building on Nillion.
Looking forward to it. Maybe give us a little bit of a background on yourself, then me and Lucas will do quick intros for this first episode here, and we can kick it off from there.
Yeah, so I've been in the decentralized space for quite some time now. Um, so I started with, in the Bitcoin world and then Ethereum and so on. And I was really taken in by the promise of smart contracts and how transformational they could be. So on the one hand, smart contracts are everywhere now. We really showed the power and the value proposition of smart contracts. On the other hand, there's always been something missing, and we're going to get to why Nillion excites me. But uh, I also want to mention my background. So I've studied computational biology. I was really interested in AI, and I was interested in the intersection of comp bio and AI for quite a long time. Now, back in the day, the field wasn't so evolved, so I never ended up pursuing it. Uh, and I actually ended up working in the finance industry for a decade. So I worked on derivatives. I saw a lot of very interesting things. I saw the financial crisis and a couple of other notable events. But it's seeing the over centralization in the financial industry that made me so interested in technologies that facilitate decentralization. Uh, I saw a lot of complexity that's not being handled really well. And so uh, I left the financial industry to really focus on the technologies that can build a better future. Um, now, just going to come back to the missing piece. So in 2017, we started Cryptonomic. We built a bunch of stuff. We were involved in several ecosystems, but also collaborated with some major financial institutions on their blockchain strategy and build out. Um, but at all times, the the lack of confidentiality, lack of privacy was a major hole. Like it really stopped the achievement of scale or a really rock solid use case. So last year, I was kind of looking at what the future might bring. I heard a little bit about Nillion, I think about a year ago at ETH Denver, and then finally at the Scaling Ethereum Hackathon last year with my team. We're just kind of looking at it in an open-ended way. We found Nillion and some of the other privacy-preserving technologies, and that I think was the missing link. So here I am, it's 2025, and we're trying to bring blind compute to the world of uh, computational biology, to the world of genomics, using blind compute as one of the anchors of our effort.
I love it. Great intro. I think just to follow up on that before we really dig into it, Lucas, you want to give a quick intro on yourself?
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure, Vishak, to be in this podcast. Obviously, we've been working on for a while, and I've been working on Nillion since basically the beginning as I'm part of the founding team. I've spent the last 3 years on this, thinking about all sorts of different interesting challenges that come with building out blind computation, such as cryptoeconomics, governance, product, of course. And over the last year and a half, I've spent most of my time working with super exciting founders and builders in the space like you, Vishak, to identify how we can actually create new design space, right, in crypto, how we can actually build trustless systems centered around privacy, centered around security and sovereignty. And yeah, that's my journey, and I'm extremely passionate every day to work with builders like you guys, and yeah, to explore different frontier.
Love it. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Juan. I joined Nillion about a month and a half ago now, so new but also old at the same time with how fast this all moves. Working on Lucas's team, and basically what we're doing is we're having conversations with founding entrepreneurs all day, every day, to help them go to market and really execute their vision using the Nillion tech stack. And coming from an L1 previously, it's really exciting to see this new vertical within privacy that this unlocks. and how that really merges with all the crypto economic incentives that we've already been developing outside of the privacy space for a long time now. And seeing these two things come together is truly exciting to me. That's one of the things I really want to talk to you about as well today, Vishak. But yeah, maybe let's start at a high level. You know, you said you've been through quite a few tumultuous events in the industry, both within sounds like TradFi and crypto. What was it that really spurred you, or caused you to initially decide, yes, this is what I have to focus on? It's genomic sequencing, private genomic sequencing, because I think for a lot of people listening to this from the outside, they're like, that's very specific. What drove you to do that? So maybe tell us a little bit about the background there.
Yeah, honestly, it's FOMO because when genomics first came out, 23andMe, personal genomics first came out with 23andMe, there was a lot of promise. But, as with many other early technologies, there were stumbling blocks. Everything was a little bit janky. But all the users of personal genomics, all the early adopters were very forgiving because we saw potentially a really bright future ahead. And as with many other technologies in general, there was a lot of early promise, but the follow-up wasn't great. And you won't be surprised that some of the elements were the lack of openness, some of the problems were the lack of privacy, and really very serious concerns about what's going to happen with our data. At the same time, in recent years, there's been a huge acceleration in the discoveries that are coming in medical technology. Some of the things that we were all really excited about 10, even 15 years ago that seem to be really held up, they're really getting unlocked right now. There's a organic movement all around the world because people have these tools at their disposal where they're able to sort of take charge of their own health, and they can work in collaboration with their healthcare providers. They can work in collaboration with the scientific community. So some manifestations are some of the stuff, let's say, Brian Johnson is doing, which, I know it's controversial, but it's just a sign of the times. And the amount of technology and know-how we have right now, it really makes it frustrating how locked up our data is. So I used 23andMe on DNA data, on DNA data a long time ago, but they've had the same boring insights for so long. Sometimes I'm not even able to download my data. And a lot of the listeners here might know about all the breaches they've suffered. Now, if your financial records get breached, that's serious. If your health records get breached, that's serious. But if they leak your DNA, that's really serious. 5 years ago, maybe that wasn't such a big deal. But with every passing year now, you're going to see that it has more and more severe consequences for people all around the world. And this is also an exciting time because there's been a Moore's law in effect for genomics. The cost of sequencing a genome just keeps going down and down and down. So the amount of genomic data that's going to be produced is absolutely mind-boggling. So because of all this, the opportunity just seemed so big, and my frustrations as a consumer seemed so big that it just seemed to be the right time to work on this problem.
I would love to touch on some of the points you just made there, specifically, the lack of utility, right, of the data once you have engaged in sort of submitting that kit and getting some of the data and stuff like this. But I think before we go there, I think it would be valuable if you could outline to all the listeners what exactly you actually do if you sort of use these genomic platforms. What are you receiving? What is the value you get there? And why are people doing this? What's the point?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So far, the value isn't that great. So people typically, what they do is they receive a kit in the mail. They provide a sample, a biological sample, which is then mailed to a lab, and then the service provides some health and ancestry insights. On the ancestry side, it is helpful to a lot of people to kind of know their background, especially people who are adopted or they have some, they require some clarification about their family. But a lot of the world didn't keep great ancestry records. So it's not been super useful so far. It's great as a party trick. If you go to the 23andMe subreddit, a lot of people discuss their ancestry. But if you compare it to the quality and the quantity of insights that are available right now, it's actually kind of underwhelming. Similarly, on the healthcare side, there is a genetic component to all disease. I mean, genetics aren't destiny, but they're very important for someone to recognize their lifelong health risks and maybe sometimes even take actions that are going to make their health better, make their nutrition better, and even protect them from some severe conditions. So one example is the diagnosis of rare diseases has been very inefficient to the frustration of many people so far. So the idea is you get a lot of good ancestry information and you get a lot of good health traits. But in reality, the ancestry information is very limited, and the health traits, due to a combination of stasis and regulation and closeness, they're not very useful. Even though you could be going to your health professionals with a lot of information that they can help you with. It's still not part of standard medical practice.
I guess like my assumption is that a lot of people that are using those genomic platforms are primarily using it to find out more about ancestry, right? Finding out more where they come from and some interesting stats that they might have a genomic preference for sweet snacks or whatever. Is that right? Or are people actually going the other way and taking those tests for others much more serious reasons, such as you said, behavioral insights and genomic insights that can actually change their health, right? What's sort of the breakdown if you have those data sets, and who is using it, right? Is it primarily younger people? Is it primarily older people? What's sort of the age breakdown? If you have any info on that, I'd be curious.
Yeah, so usually it splits two ways. Ancestry DNA, which is part of the Ancestry service, it has tens of millions of users that are primarily interested in their ancestry. So how Italian are they? How Mongolian are they? Things like that. So it's more fun. It's more lighthearted, and that's the primary interest people have. 23andMe, which is a public company, has about 16 million users so far, and even their ancestry is more important because honestly, their health insights they're not very modern. So that's on the personal genomic side. But if you look at it, things in totality, about 300,000 couples in the United States every year go through IVF as part of the fertility process, and an increasing number of them are going through genetic testing to help the IVF process. So that has unlocked a lot more genetic testing for various diseases. Also in a medical domain, now we're doing genetic tests. And one of the things that sort of missed is in the United States, in all 50 states, every newly born child is required to be genetically tested, and the state retains their DNA for, depends. In New York State, it's 26 years. In most industrialized countries, that is or will be the case. And then soon, even in parts of the world that are not advanced economies, that might become standard. So on the one hand, personal genomics is almost a lighthearted, it's more casual. But on the other hand, at scale, genetic testing and genomics is being used because by both government and the medical system at a large scale.
So,
So basically, yeah, go on.
we're both curious. So one thing I want to ask is, we'll get to the openness and what that enables for the users for various different reasons. But before we do that, I want to take a step back because I think maybe for the three of us here, it's maybe somewhat obvious or intuitive or second nature that you not owning your data is a bad thing, and it has very tangible, measurable downsides to you, your quality of life, and your future. But maybe for everyone that's not the case, because I know, for example, you and I, Vishak, we had this exchange on X where I think it was related to Brian Johnson and all these kind of at-home testing kits that are coming out, and how the costs are becoming more affordable for your average person to get insights to analytics and results that previously were only available to the select few. But then even in those comments, there was some people saying like, well, yeah, but I'm not going to send all this sensitive health data to a centralized third party that can do as it pleases with it. And then other people responding, well, who cares that they have my worthless data? They can have it, haha. And then other people responding with, well, actually, this is the reason why maybe you should be concerned about it. So let's go through some of those reasons. Like, what are the reasons, aside from the positive outcomes and benefits of owning your data, what are the things you want to guard against, or what are the things you should be aware of? So let's just go into that for a second.
Yeah, so the number one thing everyone should be aware of is that your data can be used against you. Most data can be used against you, but healthcare data and genetic data can be used in a very insidious manner. You may not even be aware, and it might be used to deny you opportunities or to kind of disqualify you from goods and services. There are laws against it in certain countries, and in certain countries there are not. So far, genetic data especially, and healthcare data in general, could not be weaponized against you in that drastic a manner. So it was easy to pass legislation that supposedly protected patients and users. But we've seen in other domains, as soon as data becomes valuable, some kind of data becomes valuable, the well-natured, friendly nerds are pushed aside, and some very odious people take over and do bad things with the data. So you may feel, if you're listening to this, you may feel, what do I have to worry about? Like, I'm protected by the law, like the government will help me. Well, this data is just now starting to become really, really important. Why do you think this domain is going to be any different, right? So your data can be used against you. That's the number one thing. The second thing is this healthcare data is becoming more salient because health span is becoming much more important than anything else. Even my parents, who have reached retirement age, they can expect to live a long life. If I'm lucky, perhaps I can live even longer. So the quality of, it's not just health span, like lifespan has been solved, but the quality of our health as we age becomes more and more important. And there, the classic system of medical treatment has not been so great. You go to the doctor, when you break a hand, or, you start, your eyes grow dim, or you're bleeding, that's when you go to the doctor. But as our lifespans increase, in order to improve our health span, we need to do innovative things with our health. We need to take different kinds of healthcare data, liquid biopsies, different kinds of imaging that'll become more and more common, combine it with our genetic data, combine it with other health records. That composability is really important. So this data, while you'll have access to all of this, is going to be moving all around the place. And do you really want everyone to have a copy of all your data? I don't have to go into a lot of detail. You can imagine all the negative consequences. So having that composability of data without losing the privacy, security, and the openness of the data is very, very, very important.
This is fascinating, and I think it very much reflects a lot of the experiences we've made over the last 3+ years at Nillion, to be honest with you, right? So I would say the first point you raised is the defensive reason, right? Your data is at risk, somebody else has it, they can exploit it, share it, misuse it. We build technology to protect the data. So that's sort of the defense, the bolt argument, right? And the second argument is actually going to offense, right? Which is not just protecting your data, but actually unlocking new value, right? You're breaking down barriers. You're tapping into the beautiful world of composability and the economic value and productivity benefits you could get with that, right? I personally actually think it's the latter that is more appealing to users initially, right? Although I think like the first reason certainly is getting stronger. I mean, now at 23andMe, we can dive into that in more detail in this chat. I would love to. I think people are becoming more aware that this is not great state to be in, right? But still, I think that ultimately, if you compare the argument of use this, then your data is safe, versus use this, and all of a sudden you get all these new insights that can make you live longer lives or earn new money, right? New income opportunities that were previously unavailable. I would bet on the latter being more attractive and appealing to people to hop on, right? So that's what got me so excited actually as well when I thought about what could be done if genomic data is in a credible, neutral, privacy preserving, security first network. It is, as you said, Vishak, it's the ability to combine the data with all these other data points, right? Environmental data points, behavioral data points, locational data points, your sleep data, your consumption pattern, your calorie burns. All of a sudden, this is a completely new insight. and also a new economic opportunity, I think, right? Because there are probably going to be quite a few people out there that would love to sort of understand these patterns in more detail, right? And this can be new income streams that I think maybe people aren't even aware of, right? So I think it's primarily the latter that's so fascinating. Of course, the former is critical as a foundational pillar, but I think it's the latter that excites people even more. So would you agree with that? Or is your feedback that you're getting from people different?
No, I absolutely agree. So we're trying to go live and onboard as many users as possible. The appeal to privacy is very important to me, to the whole team, to the initial cohort of users, but that only gets us so far. Why? Because that is a concern that people have, but people are busy. They need something that inspires them, that unlocks value for them. All this latent energy in the genetic genomic data that they have, it needs to be unlocked. And Juan, back to that X back and forth interaction that we had. By the way, for the listeners' benefit, I was talking about how I spent $37 in India last month to get a report with 101 health insights. And the first thing I did was I attached it to a local LLM, and I attached all my other health records, and I just ran an analysis. And of course, after I found the results, I ran it through my qualified medical provider, and actually it was quite useful. But what was slightly frustrating to me was I couldn't also just take all my genetic insights and my genetic data and combine it. And it's only a matter of time before this happens. So, even in a country like India, which is still developing, people see a lot of value in getting these 101 parameter health tests, where you have the possibility of just paying $37 and getting this much insight into your health. By the way, there are other plans where they'll run a whole battery of other tests and they give you a nice 100-page, beautifully formatted PDF report. It shows that people want to take charge of their health. It shows that people have this interest. A lot of people listening to Andrew Huberman, a lot of people listening to Peter Attila, a lot of people are listening to these people that are bringing health insights and research to the mass consciousness. So people are really, really interested at scale in improving their health outcomes and really understanding how they work. And the AI angle is really important. And it just, especially for those of us who have suffered chronic or frustrating long-term conditions, it's such a blessing, right? Like there's, you can just plug it into an AI and you get all these insights, which of course will be validated by a medical provider. So the rewards of AI with healthcare are so enormous. And of course, there's also risk, but just a reward that's offered by composability, as opposed to me manually uploading everything into the local LLM. If you imagine things that just work out of the box with composability, that's so rewarding. Even people who haven't even heard about the word privacy will be sold. They'll be so interested. And because of regulation, because of silos, because of honestly old-fashioned thinking, this stuff is not possible at the moment. This is something that I think we can solve right now.
No, that's beautiful. It's music to my ears, and yeah, I think what gets really interesting, composability is a word that's thrown around a lot, and maybe the people who are listening to this, if they have a background in crypto and that's where they come from, they might think about, the analogy we like to use is they might think of money Legos, right, where you can take different tokenized representations or wrappers and leverage them across different multiple protocols seamlessly. Well, this is kind of the same thing with your data, right, where now you actually have full control of your data. So not only is it private, meaning that other people cannot access it unless you lease it or grant them access, right? But it also means you can take those data points that you've created, which are valuable to somebody else on the buying side. That could be medical research company, it could be a supplement company, it can be any sort of company that would benefit from accessing that data, and you can now monetize those insights, right? So I think, as Lukas said, it's a pretty easy decision between take a DNA kit where that data is going to live on a third-party server, and who knows who's going to have access to it and what they're going to do with it and how that's going to negatively impact me. Or am I going to essentially take a DNA kit that is going to end up making up for the cost that I invested in it in the first place in a recurrent fashion, right? Because you can get paid continuously for these different insights that you generate on a pay-per-use basis if you want. So, that leads me to my next question, which is what would make you excited like what would you like to see built on top of this framework that you're building, right? Because anybody can come in and they can build things on top of it. So what might some examples be that you've been thinking of?
Yeah, the beauty of building an open protocol is the number one thing that you can be excited about are things you haven't even thought about. When they built any layer one blockchain, especially, going back to Ethereum, they built it with the intention that they're unlocking all these use cases that they haven't even thought about. So the Ethereum white paper contains some example use cases. But if you go back and read it, things actually worked out much more interestingly. A lot of use cases came about that the founders and the creators didn't even think about. And the same applies, I think, to Nillion. The same applies to MonadicDNA. So the number one thing is everything is so closed up. You open it up. I just want to see what people come up with. So the surprise is the number one thing that I'm actually looking forward to. But the stuff that are the known knowns, the obvious stuff that I want to see built. Number one, there's been a lot of R&D, especially in population genetics. So, and I'm speaking, on my own behalf. So there are countries, I'm originally from India, and in India, for a variety of reasons, most ancestry records were lost. Sometimes because for historical reasons, and sometimes because people just didn't value them. They just kind of got rid of them. So because of all this research, now I can get more fine-grained insights. So people in Iceland have tremendously wonderful ancestry insights. Now I can get something on par with that, right? So that just taking all the latest research, not just ancestry, but also health, that's something I'm looking forward to. The second thing I'm looking forward to is composability on top of composability. So there are some rare diseases that are not diagnosed directly. What happens is you get diagnosed with A, B, C, and D. And then if you're lucky, the doctor who may know about the rare disease says, oh, actually, you have A, B, C, and D. That's usually indicative of rare disease Z, right? Like it could be EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I'm hoping that because our ecosystem will be finding all these different health insights, people can actually compose over them and find these second order insights that will change people's lives for the better at scale, which is not possible right now because of the closed protocol that we use. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, genetics is just, genetic medicine is going to be used everywhere. Genomics is going to be used everywhere. Right now, every time you need to use a service, you need to get sequenced again and again and again. Instead, what we want is sequence once, use anywhere, right? Like you get the DNA sequence, it's in your possession, and then the ecosystem, you can use it everywhere. You can use it on 100 different sites with some vetting, right? So the ability to remove the friction from using your DNA data in collaboration with all these other kinds of health data. Like think about your fitness app. Think about your favorite fitness app. Everyone likes different ones. MonadicDNA, the ecosystem will just show up as another app. And then you just hook up the two, and now you can unlock the potential from both apps. And honestly, I think a lot of these things are going to migrate to blind decentralized platforms like Nillion anyway. So the opportunity to combine insights is just going to be huge. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and I think this cannot be emphasized enough, to be honest, right? Like you mentioned initially in the introduction that 23andMe had issues across the board, but I think one of them was the lack of utility, right? As you highlighted, right? It's like I use it, I upload data, I get my industry insights, and that's about it, right? But having the ability to composably, permissionlessly use that data across different applications, that's really, really powerful, right? And I think that's really the main value proposition. The one argument is saying, yeah, your data is more secure than it was before, but I think this one is a stronger one because of the, a wide range of utility that users can benefit from, right? I guess my question is like, we see a lot of different marketplace ideas in crypto, right? We have seen them across different markets. They pop up, particularly now with CKTLS data, bring your Uber data or your AWS data, or your Amazon data, your Spotify data all into one place and learn more about you and all of stuff. And I'm pretty bullish on this. I think this is exciting. But the challenge is less about the supply side, actually, I would say, because yeah, crypto, and one thing crypto really is good in is setting token incentives and solving coordination challenges. The challenges we have more in the crypto market are relating to the buy side, right? Who's actually going to pay for that data? Who's actually going to generate income for the protocol or ultimately for the users to make it worth their while? Because the dream sounds amazing, right? I think the next phase we need to explore is next to building out these marketplaces in different markets to actually then also generate sustainable economic income that can survive without token incentives, right? So my question would be, with respect to MonadicDNA specifically, if you had to guess today, I know you mentioned composability and top of composability and not knowing yet what's going to happen, and I totally get that, and that's super bullish and exciting. But like, if you had to pick one company or one institution that wants some insights that partially DNA data consists of, what would that be that can actually break the buy side challenge with respect to these marketplaces in crypto? What would you think would that be?
Yeah, it depends on the stage. At this stage, an absolute dream would be a major health institution, such as, I'm in New York City, Memorial Sloan Kettering. It's a cancer center. They can do so much good in the world, and at the same time, they produce so many actionable goods to the world. So someone like that choosing to use the platform for some beneficial research would be such a huge endorsement of the platform. So someone like that, Stanford Medicine, there's some VC-run hospitals as well. So if they choose to use this platform, and I think they will, that would be a ringing endorsement, because one thing that sets healthcare apart, one thing that's sort of sets genomics, DNA apart, is how intrinsic to our existence it is. Everything else is sort of synthetic, right? Like your Uber rides, your Amazon order history, things like that. But this is you. Like, this is a fundamental aspect of you. So because this is a special domain, having usage from research institutions is very, very important. But also there is a lot of there's a lot of consumer behavior, I think, that can be studied really well. Like, that opportunity hasn't existed so far because of how closed DNA data is. So with the user's consent, I think a lot of commercial insights can be unlocked. And I don't want to say who the specific entities would be without legal advice, as it's a very regulated domain. But you can imagine who I'm talking about. Companies that can get direct behavioral insights with consent and with respect to the user, of course.
Yeah, and what I like about it is, as I said before, in the marketplaces that we coming up in crypto, it's a little bit vague sometimes of what people think the buyers end up being. But I think in your case, it's easy to visualize it, right? It's easy to visualize why combining genomic data with other data sets could be valuable, why there could be buyers. So it could certainly be one of those markets, I think, where crypto rails, decentralized marketplaces, and sovereignty, and ultimately privacy-led technologies could see a huge win in. So sounds great.
Well, what's
One
cool?
thing I want to message. Apologies.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. One thing I just want to message is we are trying to build a new paradigm in healthcare. Healthcare has been very top-down. So you go to the doctor tells you do this, do that, and then you just follow the instructions. Whereas now we're seeing a very genuine and widespread desire to be more bottom-up. A lot of people are thinking, what's my health going to be like in 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, 50 years? So the demand for combining different data sets is actually from the bottom up. So a lot of providers in the healthcare space who have had to go through bottlenecks to actually reach users now have an open platform to provide that value. So One really quick example, there are all these, well, I'll use an Indian example. In India, there are all these path lab companies, and they offer really cheap and accurate medical testing, and you can get them on any street corner, and you get really quick, efficient service for very low cost. And the amount of different kinds of medical tests they can offer is staggering. So it would be fantastic if they can start using MonadicDNA as quickly as possible, because they have so much potential to marry the data that they have with the data that we'll be unlocking and produce actionable insights for users that are seeking this information from the bottom up.
I mean, we have those in Latin America as well. These kind of street corner testing centers that you're referring to, and it's crazy to think where this is headed. And imagine what they could do for you if, when they were running these, lab analysis when they were giving you these results for these analysis, they could tap into your genomic data alongside it, right? With something you could portably just plug in without having to go through the whole thing again while you're there. Which could take weeks in some cases. But going back to this, who's the buyer and what's the buyer doing with the data? I think there might be a flag that goes off that says, well, you've been talking about safeguarding your data, and now you're talking about somebody else buying it. I just wanted to clarify something, which is that, and this is going to lead into why Nillion, but using the Nillion tech stack, you can have it so that these data buyers, whoever they may be, can get the outputs of a certain query without actually ever seeing the inputs or the underlying user, personally identifying information or the data sets that those users are providing. So if there is a sort of mechanism where you're being compensated every time your data is tapped into, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're seeing that you, Lukas, or you, Vishak, are have these conditions, and this is your DNA, right? It's that they are just getting the outputs based on that information that you've provided. So it is still privacy preserving in that sense, which is very different to the way that things are done today, where these are your results in plain text tied to your name, being handled by a third party that can do with it as it pleases, and sometimes that's really to your detriment. So I think that leads to why Nillion. So this is Nillion podcast. You're building on Nillion. What was it that led you to us, right? And how did you make that decision to build a Nillion?
Yeah, so a year ago, I was really jaded by the crypto space because it held so much promise, and the space grew a lot. But the initial promise of empowering people and unlocking real value, that seemed pretty far from where a lot of us imagined it would be. So I was jaded, and I was thinking, how do we go from here, right? Like, where do we go? There are certain promises that we all worked really hard towards, and why are they not here yet? So I thought, okay, maybe it's been quite a few years, a lot more than a decade. Maybe it's time to do something brand new. So about a year ago, I started doing a little bit of research, and I found that there's actually a lot of improvements in privacy enhancing technologies. And there are some projects that are trying to do it at scale. Now, I experimented with a few. They were a bit janky, but I was intrigued. And then in the process of trying to figure something new out, my team and I, we took a break from what we were doing, and we participated in this hackathon that I told you guys about at the beginning of the call. And just in the list of the sponsored projects, there was something called Nillion. And the premise seemed great. It's a blind computer, decentralized storage, decentralized compute, both together. But I was skeptical because I've seen so many projects like this before. But, because I have a background in computational biology, and I was very sort of scared by the meltdown of 23andMe, I thought, why not take a stab at building something better? So I was very skeptical. My team was skeptical. We went into the hackathon, 2-week hackathon, thinking, well, let's give this a try. So we started building with it, and shockingly, it actually worked. Like, I don't know how many of your listeners are participants or former participants of crypto hackathons, but there is a lot of misleading statements made by various projects. But in this case, it actually worked, right? And we did well during the hackathon, which was, it's always good to receive external validation. But there was also really great follow-up from the Nillion team. Lukas actually got in touch shortly after the hackathon, asked what kinds of support we need, how can Nillion be fine-tuned for our use case. And we shared our observations, we shared our needs. And ever since, the Nillion team has really been backing us. So we've played around with the technology a lot. We talked about certain roadblocks we were running into, and then the team has been talking to us. And in fact, sometimes on the calls, we've had appearances by various founders at Nillion. We have had the CTO of the team show up in order to kind of work through our concerns and unblock us. And that's been really interesting to see, because so many projects that just want to launch a token and get rich and all of that. But here we're talking to people that actually want to build stuff. We're looking at the academic papers that the Nillion team is putting out. So we get this sense of seriousness. So we want to do something very, very serious, which is take people's DNA data. It's very different from your social security number, your national identifier, your passport, anything. It's something very intrinsic to you. So we don't take this lightly. We're taking something that's very, very important and unlocking a huge opportunity. But that opportunity also attracts all kinds of people, like moths to the flame. So we have to be really sure that the team that's building it, they're technically credible and they have the right values. So over the past few months, we found that kind of credibility with the Nillion team. And as far as the broader vision is concerned, I've been talking a lot about healthcare data, combining it with other data sets. Regardless of what we do over here, our various data sets are being combined, and AI and just plain old data science is being used to study each one of us, to make observations about us, using all the disparate data sets that corporations and governments have. Now, when you bring genetic data into the mix, things can become very, very complicated. So the ability to safeguard the data and process it is really important. There's other solutions in the past, Filecoin, IPFS, they offer decentralized storage, Arweave, decentralized storage. There are other solutions that have been tried in the past, like Golem, that offer decentralized compute. There are some solutions that offer cryptography, but Nillion sort of combines them. And then one more thing I want to mention is there are 3 broad technologies that are really hot right now. There's MPC, which Nillion does. There's also FHE, ZK, and these are all complementary technologies, of course. But the key thing to me is no matter what you use ZK, you use FHE, MPC. At the end of the day, if you want to build a consumer app, if you want to build an app that's used by the masses, even if you don't use Nillion, you'll end up reinventing Nillion. You need the decentralized storage to give the possession of the data to the people. You need decentralized compute that runs independent of the user, on a cluster or on a network, independent of the user device. So even if you, for whatever reason, you don't want to build on Nillion, you're going to end up on Nillion, or you're going to end up rebuilding it. So I think that's the appeal of Nillion overall to us.
You're on mute, Lukas.
As always. No, thanks a lot for the kind words. It's pleasure to hear that, of course. I guess one thing our listeners might wonder about, you mentioned Nillion, you mentioned some of the capabilities of compute, of storage, privacy, and we mentioned blind compute, we mentioned privacy and technologies in this call. We mentioned composability, Lego, data Legos, right? All these keywords. I think what might be useful for some of the listeners is to get a better understanding of sort of high-level flow, right? So I'm a user. I would interact with your platform. Where's the data stored? How's the data processed? Where is privacy? What's unique about Nillion as a context compared to other networks? I think that could probably be useful for people who might not be familiar with the architecture, might not be familiar with the stack that much, to just learn more how data goes from A to B, right? So do you want to give us some understanding on that, bro?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to contrast it to an established old school player like 23andMe. So in both cases, yes, you have to receive a kit. You have to sort of spit into the kit to provide a sample. So that doesn't change. or you walk into a lab somewhere. Now, what happens from this point? From this point, in the old school, everything beyond this point is owned by the company you're using. Everything is owned by 23andMe. They hold your biological sample. They may dispose it sometimes they don't. Then the digital sequence that they have produced from the biological sample, they may keep it, they may destroy it. It really depends. Most of the time they keep it because it's very valuable, but it's not in your possession. It's stored on their server, and their server can go down anytime. They can go out of business, or they can just choose to remove you from your data. And finally, when it comes time to get value from the data, they're the only ones who can operate on the data. So they'll give you some health and some ancestry insights, but that's it. For everything else, you may have some manual process. You may have to beg them for a copy of the data. Now, what happens here? Just you provide a sample. Now we're working with I actually have a call a couple of hours from now. We're trying to work with a lab that is respectful of just like us, of the user end to end, right? So your sample is verifiably destroyed. The data only goes through our secure API. So you provide a sample, you receive a unique identifier, and then you install our app, or you can use the website, and you log in there. There's some keys generated for you, and I don't want to get into that too much because this is not like DeFi crypto. You don't need MetaMask. You don't need any of this stuff. In the background, there's some keys being generated. Only reason I mention it is to underscore that these keys allow the user to control all the data. But they can enter their unique identifier into the app. At some point, the sample is ready, and we have an arrangement with the provider so that the data goes through our API, and the data is encrypted from the user's device and stored on a Nillion cluster. The Nillion cluster itself is decentralized. Now we're thinking of pairing with some reputable providers, but we may also just use some pre-existing Nillion cluster. But the point is that the data is not owned by us. It's not owned by MonadicDNA. On your behalf, we put it on a Nillion cluster that is operated by reputable parties in a decentralized way. So even if tomorrow MonadicDNA go out of business, or somehow return evil, which we won't, but even then we can't take your data away from you. We can't lock you out from your data. And then because the data is on the Nillion cluster, third parties can either approach us, so we can offer additional insights from third parties, or you can go to a third party website and it redirects to MonadicDNA. It verifies whether the third party is sort of certified by us or by some reputable party, and the computation that they want to run on your data, whether that's also verified by us or by some reputable party. And then the number of traits, the number of analyses that you can have on your data is infinite. And again, tomorrow MonadicDNA could disappear. Meteor hits this office, alas, but your data is still there, and someone else can offer the same service on top of the same data. You don't need us. In fact, we're building everything so that once we facilitate your onboarding onto this decentralized ecosystem, you don't actually need us. And the only reason you'll need us is we're doing such a fantastic job. We're the best service provider. We're the most respectful and functional and value producing provider that you can use. So that's a huge differentiator. We're not trying to create a walled garden like 23andMe. And then finally, let's get to data deletion, because that's very important to a lot of people. Let's say you're concerned. Let's say you're worried for some reason. You can just hit a button. It's under your control. You don't have to go through us. You can hit a button either through our app, or maybe some developer might create a website, and you can just delete your data. You can delete all the insights. And finally, all the insights, all the results of the computation that are being provided, you have to be in the loop to decode the computation. So no one can steal your data, no one can steal your insights. And the amount of value that will unlock is going to be tremendous. And one more thing I just want to mention, 23andMe is like going to a hospital. Like, there's a lot of medical aspects to DNA. There's a lot of medical aspects to genomics, personal genomics, but we can also have a lot of fun with it. Like, a lot of people like, for example, they like fantasy or anime. So, like, would you like to know, based on your genetic traits, like um, which Lord of the Rings character you are, or whatever? So, there's a lot of fun we can have with our DNA, and that's all being stolen from us, and hopefully that'll be unlocked, and that's going to be like a huge contrast. And because third parties can operate on your data fully privately, all the long tail of insights that will be available to all the listeners and users of the platform, because it's all being stored on these Nillion clusters, is basically infinite.
It's awesome. I mean, the way I would love to summarize it is the way we sometimes say it in a very brief, sort of manner, which is to start with not your keys, not your coins, right? And this one is not your keys, not your data, right? And this is really how I would summarize it, which is sovereignty and being in control of the data and not having to trust another third party in exploiting the data, sharing the data, misusing the data, right? So, I mean, yeah, I think this is also particularly in this use case so important because it couldn't get much more high value than that. Let's put it that way, right? When you think about data, genomic data is about as sensitive as it can get. And it's a good exemplification, I think, for how powerful these privacy technologies and blind computation can be, right? So cool. I mean, maybe just as I don't know, Juan, if you have any other questions, what I would love to hear still is what are your plans, right? How would you go from here to MonadicDNA becoming a reality and me being able to figure out which Lord of the Rings character I maybe need to.
Yeah, so we're in an absolute tearing hurry. Not just because we're excited about building this, which we are, but also 23andMe, which tested 14 to 16 million people. Their future is very dark. They might either go under very soon, or they might be acquired by someone that we don't like. So there is an imperative to deliver something really quickly. And of course, we're working with the Nillion team on some of the latest, greatest stuff that they're putting out. And we're gonna be putting out an app that lets people securely store their data using all the privacy, using combination of all the privacy enhancing technologies. So watch out for that app. We're trying to go live with it in the coming 2 months in this first quarter of 2025. But more importantly, once we kickstart this ecosystem, we're going to be reaching out to all these third parties that were really stymied so far. So one example is illustrative DNA. I use illustrative DNA by manually uploading my data. So they don't have to be locked out. We want to bring them in. We want to acquire some good percentage of the existing 23andMe users, use that as the impetus to kick off this ecosystem, bring in the third parties really quickly, and then demonstrate value to like the millions of people out there that haven't been genetically tested, or they have and they just kind of forgot about it. So we don't actually need a lot of people to demonstrate a lot of value. So we're using this opportunity to capture as many of those users into our ecosystem as possible. And I say capture in a very good way, because once you start using it, you're going to keep using it over and over. The retention is going to be great. We're going to build a flywheel. And then speaking more generally, once we demonstrate the flywheel, once we demonstrate not just the protocol, but also how effective technologies like Nillion are. Keep in mind, we're here, Nillion is not a blockchain. It uses blockchains for coordination, but it's not a blockchain. MonadicDNA is not a blockchain. It uses blockchains for coordination. These are consumer apps. These are not meant for like 15 anons on crypto Twitter. This is meant for the masses. So once we demonstrate how useful this is, we really want to unlock the institutional use case. We want to go to governments. We want to go to hospital systems. We want to go to IVF clinics. We want to go to all these new emerging kinds of health providers like Insight Tracker, health apps, and we want to integrate with every single one of them. Anyone who's using genetic data, they should come to us. And by us, I mean our ecosystem. We'll have all kinds of capable people in our ecosystem. I think within a year, all kinds of smart, empowered people. There's so many people that are geniuses at computational biology, geniuses at biology. They should all just come in. We're going to bring them all in, and we're going to unlock all this value and across different sectors, government, healthcare, industry, and consumer. So I think it's going to be a very exciting journey. And if you're amongst the initial users, you're pioneers in a sense. You're pioneers on the Nillion ecosystem, you're pioneers in the MonadicDNA ecosystem, and together we can bootstrap something that will be used all over the world. I think if we're successful, it's going to become part of the laws and regulation, because not using these technologies, not using pets, not using something like Nillion, not using MonadicDNA, not doing AI on health data in a sensible and privacy-preserving manner is going to be seen as something that's unethical, immoral, and it might actually become regulated out in the long term. So that's what I'm really excited about in the coming months as we put out our app and our website, and we collaborate with the Nillion team on some exciting things coming up soon.
You know what's really exciting about this is I often point to monadic DNA when people are asking for examples of what do you mean by Nillion applications are tapping into white space, because that's a term we often use, right? And what that really means, and I hope that the listeners of this podcast today are taking this away with them, is that these are massive total addressable markets that are being unlocked because privacy isn't being added on as an afterthought in a sense of like, oh, and you know what would be nice if it also happened to be private. It's the other way around, where these applications are not possible without the data that's being computed on being fully private and never being decrypted. So I think instead of looking at it as privacy as a nice to have, you have to think about it as privacy is a requisite for where we're going, a prerequisite for where we're going. And the way you're doing it with Monadic and the flywheel, as you mentioned, that it's going to unlock is, absolutely incredible. And I'm, very excited. I think that your pitch there at the end, especially, really got the gears turning in terms of what this makes possible. But we're coming up at the top of the hour here, so unless either of you have anything else you'd like to add, I think we could probably wrap it up here.
I just want to say what you said is just so prescient. That's the heart of the issue. Like if you're listening to this episode, really, it's the things that we can facilitate that don't exist. That's the key thing. It's not like we're trying to take existing things and sort of decentralize them or make them private. These things don't exist because this data is not open. It's not private. Like the rocket's going to take off the moment we start taking this data, making it open and private. That's when the rocket is going to take off. There are things that people don't know about that really revolutionize their lives. People don't know that you can do blind computation like out there in the billions, but the moment you make people aware that this is an option, it just opens up all these ideas. And the same for the DNA data. The moment they realize, oh wow, like I can have secure access to all this data and do something really innovative, that's going to turbocharge the whole space. Like I'm so excited about the future of healthcare because of these things that we can now do, these new capabilities. And without it, I don't think it's going to be anywhere as exciting.
We're pumped, needless to say. Well, thanks so much for your time, Vishak. Hope to do it again soon. I know we'll have plenty to discuss in the coming months as things really ramp up and we head to Nillion's mainnet. So yeah, if you're listening to this on X, YouTube, wherever you may be, feel free to drop any questions or comments down below, and we'll make sure to address them for next podcast we do with Vishak. So thanks again, and we'll catch you guys soon.
Always a
Take
pleasure.
care, Vishak.